Chapter 1. You know how it feels to come face to face with something you've been running from all these years? That chill that crawls up your spine, the way the air seems to freeze in your lungs, like your body already knows what your mind refuses to believe. That was how Annie felt when she saw the man standing in front of her. The ceramic cup slipped from her hand before she even realized she'd let go, shattering against the floor, but she didn't move. She couldn't. Her eyes were locked on him. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. Annie dropped to her knees, hands shaking as she picked up ceramic shards. Her manager, Kelly, rushed over with a towel, muttering something about being more careful, but Annie barely heard her. The suppressants she took every morning were supposed to keep her wolf buried. They'd worked for 6 years. 6 years of living as human as she could manage, working double shifts at this cafe, renting a studio apartment above a laundromat, keeping her head down. 6 years since she'd fled the Shadowpine Pack lands in the middle of the night with nothing but a backpack and the name of a doctor who sold black market scent blockers. The man was still standing by the door. He hadn't moved, hadn't ordered, just stood there with his hands in the pockets of an expensive black coat, watching her clean up broken porcelain like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Kelly nudged her shoulder. "Girl, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Annie forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The technique Dr. Voss had taught her. Slow the heart rate. Calm the wolf. She'd gotten good at it over the years. Good enough that she could walk past dogs without them barking. Good enough that she could get a normal job, pay normal taxes, live a normal life in a normal human city where no one knew what she really was. "I'm fine," Annie said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Just clumsy today." Kelly gave her a skeptical look, but didn't push. That was one thing Annie appreciated about working with humans. They accepted surface-level explanations. They didn't dig, didn't question, didn't look at you like they could smell the lie on your skin. When Annie finally stood up, towel full of broken ceramic and soaked with coffee, the man was gone. She scanned the cafe, pulse still hammering in her throat. Empty corner booth. Window seats full of college students. Regular morning crowd, no one out of place. Had she imagined him? Was the stress finally getting to her? 6 years was a long time to live in fear, and maybe her mind was starting to create the very thing she'd been running from. She dumped the broken mug in the trash and went back to the counter. The rest of the morning shift passed in a blur of lattes and cappuccinos and customers who asked for oat milk then changed their minds. By the time her break came at 11, Annie's hands had stopped shaking. She grabbed her coat from the back room and stepped out into the alley behind the cafe, the October air cold enough to bite. She pulled out her phone and stared at the blank screen. No messages. No calls. Same as every day for the past 6 years. Dr. Voss had been clear about the rules. No contact with anyone from her old life. No checking pack news. No searching for information about Shadowpine or its Alpha King. The human world had billions of people. As long as she stayed invisible, stayed medicated, stayed quiet, she was safe. The alley door opened behind her. Annie turned, expecting Kelly with some complaint about table 7, but it wasn't Kelly. It was him. The man from the cafe, standing 3 feet away with his hands still in his pockets, expression unreadable. Up close, he was even more unsettling. Not because he was threatening, though everything about his posture suggested controlled power, but because he looked at her like he already knew her. Like they'd met before and she'd somehow forgotten. "You dropped this," he said, holding out her apartment keys. Annie's hand went to her coat pocket. Empty. She'd been so rattled that she must have pulled them out with her phone. She reached for the keys, but he didn't let go right away. His fingers brushed hers, warm despite the cold air, and that thing in her chest, that sleeping wolf she'd worked so hard to bury, pushed against her ribs like it was trying to claw its way out. She yanked her hand back, keys clutched tight. "Thanks. You work here long?" he asked. His voice was deep, casual, but there was something underneath it. Something that made her instincts scream. "Few years," Annie said, taking a step toward the door. "I should get back." "Annie, right? Your name tag." She glanced down. Sure enough, the plastic tag was still pinned to her shirt. Of course he'd seen it. Nothing suspicious about that. Except he was still standing there, still watching her with those dark eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "Right," she said. "And you are?" "Nate." He smiled, and it should have been reassuring. It wasn't. "I just moved to the area. Looking for a good coffee spot." "This one's fine," Annie said, hand on the door handle. "Welcome to the neighborhood." She slipped back inside before he could say anything else, heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Through the small window in the door, she watched him stand there for another moment before he finally turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner of the building. Kelly was at the register, ringing up a teenager with headphones. She glanced at Annie and frowned. "You look worse now than before. Maybe you should go home early." "I'm fine," Annie said automatically. But she wasn't fine. Because that man, Nate, whoever he was, had made her wolf wake up. And once a wolf woke up, it didn't go back to sleep easy. The rest of her shift dragged. Every time the door opened, Annie's shoulders tensed. Every time someone ordered at the counter, she looked up expecting to see him again. But Nate didn't come back. By closing time, she'd almost convinced herself she was being paranoid. An attractive man had returned her keys. That was all. Nothing supernatural about it. Nothing dangerous. She took the bus home like always, sitting in the back with her earbuds in, not actually listening to anything, just creating the illusion of being unavailable, unapproachable. The bus dropped her off 2 blocks from her apartment, and she walked with her keys already in her hand, pointed out between her fingers like Dr. Voss had shown her. Basic self-defense. Human self-defense because she couldn't rely on her wolf. Couldn't let it surface even if she was in danger. Her apartment building was old, the kind with narrow stairs and thin walls where you could hear your neighbors' conversations. Annie climbed to the 3rd floor, unlocked her door, and stepped inside. The space was small, but it was hers. No pack hierarchy. No forced bonds. No Alpha King who'd decided before she'd even presented that she would be his mate whether she wanted it or not. She locked the door behind her, the deadbolt, the chain, the piece of wood she wedged under the handle. Then she went to the bathroom and opened the medicine cabinet. The suppressants were in an unmarked orange bottle. She was supposed to take one every morning, but after what happened at the cafe, after her wolf had stirred, she took 2. Swallowed them dry and waited for the familiar numbness to settle over her. It didn't come. Annie stared at her reflection in the mirror. Same face she'd had for 6 years. Same brown hair she kept cut short. Same green eyes that used to glow gold when her wolf was close to the surface. They weren't glowing now, but they felt different. Brighter. More aware. She splashed cold water on her face and went to the kitchen. Dinner was leftover rice and chicken from 2 days ago. She ate standing at the counter, barely tasting it, mind still on the man from the cafe. Nate. He'd known her name, but that was explainable. He'd seen her tag. He'd seemed interested, but that was normal too. Humans did that. They met, they talked, they flirted. It didn't mean anything. Except nothing about him had felt human. Annie threw the rest of her dinner in the trash and sat on the couch, pulling her laptop onto her knees. She shouldn't do this. Dr. Voss had been clear. No research. No looking back. But her fingers were already typing before her brain caught up. She cleared the search bar 3 times before finally typing it. Damian Cortez. Alpha King. Shadowpine Pack. The results loaded slowly, her cheap internet struggling. When they finally appeared, Annie's breath caught. The first link was a news article from 3 months ago. Alpha King Damian Cortez expands territory. Below it, a photo. Dark hair. Broad shoulders. Eyes that seemed to cut right through the camera lens. It wasn't the same man. Damian's face was harder, more severe. His jaw sharper. But there was something in the set of his shoulders, the way he stood like he owned whatever space he occupied. Something that reminded her of Nate. Annie slammed the laptop shut. She was seeing connections that weren't there. Damian was hundreds of miles away, ruling his expanded territory, probably with some other wolf as his mate by now. He'd have forgotten about the Omega who ran. She'd been nothing to him except an obligation, a bond his father had arranged before either of them had any say in it. She took a shower, hot enough to turn her skin pink, and tried to wash away the anxiety. It didn't work. By the time she got into bed, her wolf was pacing inside her chest like a caged animal. The suppressants weren't working. Maybe she'd built up a tolerance. Maybe she needed to find Dr. Voss again, get a stronger dose. But Dr. Voss had retired 2 years ago, and finding another doctor who dealt in black market wolf suppressants wasn't exactly easy. Annie closed her eyes and tried to sleep. She couldn't. Every sound in the building felt too loud. The couple arguing next door. The pipes groaning in the walls. Footsteps in the hallway outside her apartment, getting closer, stopping right outside her door. She held her breath. The footsteps didn't move. Someone was standing just beyond her door, so close she could sense their presence. Her wolf surged up, suddenly alert, suddenly present in a way it hadn't been in years. She smelled something. Pine and smoke and something darker underneath. Something that made her wolf whine in recognition. No. Impossible. Annie stayed frozen in bed, barely breathing, until the footsteps finally moved away. Down the hall. Down the stairs. Gone. She got up and checked the locks. All still in place. She looked through the peephole. Empty hallway. Nothing there. Maybe she'd imagined it. Maybe the stress was making her paranoid. She went back to bed and eventually, hours later, fell into a restless sleep. When she woke up the next morning, there was an envelope on the floor by her door. Someone had slid it under while she slept. Annie stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. No name. No address. Just thick paper, expensive, the kind humans didn't use anymore. She opened it. Inside was a single card with 3 words written in elegant script. I found you. Annie's hands started shaking. The card fell to the floor. She backed away from the door, her wolf now fully awake, fully aware, clawing at her insides like it wanted out. This couldn't be happening. She'd been so careful. 6 years of suppressance, of staying under the radar, of being no one. How had he found her? Unless it wasn't Damian. Unless it was someone else. Unless she'd made enemies she didn't even know about. Annie grabbed her phone and called the cafe. Kelly answered on the 3rd ring, sounding annoyed. It's 6 in the morning, Annie. What's wrong? I can't come in today, Annie said, her voice shaking. I'm sick. You were fine yesterday. It came on sudden. I'm sorry. Kelly sighed. Fine. But I need you tomorrow. We're already short-staffed. Annie hung up and looked at the card again, still lying on the floor like an accusation. I found you. 3 words that destroyed 6 years of safety. She couldn't stay here. Whoever sent this knew where she lived. Knew her name. Knew what she was. She packed fast. Clothes in a backpack, cash from the jar under her bed, the fake ID Dr. Voss had made her. She'd run once before. She could run again. Find another city, another job, another life. Keep running until there was nowhere left to go. Annie was almost to the door when she heard it. A knock. 3 sharp raps that made her freeze mid-step. She stood there, hand on the backpack strap, not breathing. Maybe if she didn't answer, they'd leave. Maybe they'd think she'd already gone. Annie. The voice came through the door, deep and familiar. Nate. I know you're in there. We need to talk. Go away, she said, hating how small her voice sounded. I'm not here to hurt you. Then why did you send that card? Silence. Long enough that Annie thought maybe he'd left. Then, I didn't send any card. But I can guess who did. Annie's blood went cold. She moved to the door, looked through the peephole. Nate was standing there, hands visible, expression serious. Behind him, at the far end of the hallway, she saw another figure. Tall. Dark coat. Too far away to see clearly, but she didn't need to see clearly. She could feel him. That presence that had haunted her for 6 years. The mate bond she'd been running from. Damian. Open the door, Nate said quietly. Right now, I'm the only thing between you and him. And trust me, you want my help more than his attention. Annie's hand moved to the lock before her brain caught up. The chain rattled as she unhooked it. The deadbolt clicked. The door opened just wide enough for Nate to slip inside, and then she slammed it shut behind him, throwing the locks back in place like they could actually keep out an Alpha King. Nate looked around her small apartment, taking in the packed bag, the scared expression on her face. When his eyes landed on the card still on the floor, his jaw tightened. How long ago did that arrive? He asked. I found it this morning. He picked up the card, read it, and his expression darkened further. He's playing with you. Who are you? Annie demanded, her back against the door. And don't say Nate. I'm not stupid. He looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. Nathan Cortez. Damian's younger brother. The world tilted. Annie grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. Cortez. She'd been talking to a Cortez. Drinking coffee in the same cafe as a Cortez. Let him return her keys, touch her hand, look at her like she was something worth noticing. You've been watching me, she whispered. For about 2 weeks, yeah. Why? Because my brother has been looking for you for 6 years, Nathan said bluntly. And when he finally tracked you down, I convinced him to let me make first contact. Because I know what he's like when he wants something, and I thought maybe you deserved a warning before he showed up and destroyed your entire life. Too late, Annie said, gesturing at the card. He already found me. He found you 2 weeks ago, Nathan corrected. This is him being patient. By his standards, anyway. Annie's wolf was going insane inside her chest, torn between terror and something else. Something it had been denying for 6 years. The mate bond still there, still pulling at her even though she'd run as far as she could. "I can't," she said, shaking her head. "I won't go back. He can't force me." Nathan's expression was sympathetic, but firm. "Annie, he's the Alpha King. He can do whatever he wants. The only question is whether you face him on your terms or his." A knock on the door behind her made Annie jump. This one wasn't 3 polite raps. It was one heavy strike that rattled the frame. And then a voice, deeper than Nathan's, filled with authority that made her wolf drop to its belly in submission. "Annie, open the door." She looked at Nathan, desperate. "Please." But Nathan just stepped aside, giving her space to make her choice. "I can't stop him," he said quietly. "No one can." Another knock. Harder. The wood cracked slightly. "Don't make me break down your door," Damian said, his voice deceptively calm. "Your neighbors are already staring." Annie's hands were shaking so badly she could barely work the locks. But she did. One by one. Chain. Deadbolt. Wood wedge. And then she stepped back and let the door swing open. Damian Cortez stood in her doorway, and he was exactly as she remembered. Tall. Dark-haired. Eyes that missed nothing. 6 years older but somehow looking younger, like power had agreed with him. He was wearing a black suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months, and he looked at her studio apartment like it personally offended him. "Hello, Annie," he said. And her wolf, the one she'd suppressed for 6 years, the one she'd drugged and buried and tried to kill, recognized its mate and howled. Chapter 2. Annie's vision blurred at the edges. For a moment, she thought she might actually faint, which would be humiliating and also potentially the best outcome because at least she wouldn't have to deal with this while conscious. But her legs held, barely, and she stayed upright as Damian stepped into her apartment like he owned it. Like he owned everything, which technically, in pack law, he probably did. "Get out," she managed, the words coming out weaker than she wanted. Damian didn't even acknowledge she'd spoken. He looked around her apartment with the kind of detached assessment someone might give a museum exhibit. His gaze landed on the kitchen with its chipped counters, the couch with the sunken cushion, the single window that looked out onto a brick wall. Then his eyes found her packed bag by the door. "Planning a trip?" he asked. "None of your business. Everything about you is my business." He said it like he was commenting on the weather. Casual. Absolute. "You're my mate." "I'm not your anything," Annie shot back, finding her voice. "I left. That means I rejected the bond." For the first time, something flickered across Damian's face. Not anger, exactly. Something colder. He turned to Nathan, who was still standing by the window looking like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. "Give us the room," Damian said. "Actually," Nathan started, but one look from his brother shut him up. Nathan glanced at Annie, something apologetic in his expression, and then he left. The door clicked shut behind him, and suddenly the apartment felt much smaller with just the two of them. Annie's wolf was doing something it had never done before. Instead of cowering, instead of hiding, it was pushing forward. Wanting to be closer to him. Wanting to submit and fight at the same time, a contradiction that made her stomach turn. "You can't reject a mate bond," Damian said, turning back to her. "It doesn't work that way. You can run from it, suppress it, drug it into submission. But it's still there." He took a step closer. "Still pulling at you. Still making you wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like something's missing." "I sleep fine," Annie lied. His mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile. "You always were a terrible liar. You don't know anything about me. I know you've been taking military-grade suppressants for 6 years. I know you're working at a coffee shop under a fake social security number. I know you live alone, barely eat, and haven't shifted since the night you ran." He paused. "I know you're terrified right now, and it's not just of me. It's of yourself. Of what you'll do if your wolf takes over." Annie's hands clenched into fists. "You've been stalking me." "I've been looking for you," he corrected. "There's a difference. And when I finally found you, I gave you 2 weeks to live your life. To say goodbye to whatever you built here. That's more consideration than most would give." "How generous," Annie said, acid in her voice. "You want a thank you card? I found you too. Maybe I'll send one of those." Something dangerous flashed in Damian's eyes. "Careful. Or what? You'll drag me back in chains? Force me into a bond one never wanted." She was shaking now, anger overtaking fear. "You think because your father arranged this before I even presented, I'm just supposed to roll over and accept it?" "My father's been dead for 3 years," Damian said quietly. That stopped her. Annie stared at him, searching his face for the lie. But there wasn't one. Alpha Silas Cortez, The man who'd decided her entire future before she'd turned 18 was dead. She'd imagined his death before in her darker moments. Imagined it would feel like freedom. It didn't. It felt like nothing. "I'm sorry," she said automatically, "because that's what you said." "Don't be." He was a bastard. Damian moved to her couch and sat down like he'd been invited. The arrangement died with him. "I'm not here because of some decades-old contract between alphas." "Then why are you here?" He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw something raw in his expression. Something that made her wolf whine in recognition. "Because you're mine," he said simply. "Not because of an arrangement. Not because of pack politics. Because the moment you presented, the moment your scent hit me, I knew. And so did you. That's why you ran." Annie's throat went tight. She wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. She'd been 17, newly presented, her wolf still unstable and confused. She'd walked into Alpha Silas's office for some forgotten reason, and Damian had been there, standing by the window. Their eyes had met, and the bond had snapped into place with enough force to knock the air from her lungs. She'd run 3 days later. "I didn't want it," she whispered. "I know. You were 25. I was 17. It was wrong. So I waited," Damian said. "I waited for you to turn 18, 19, 20. I waited for you to be ready. And then you disappeared. Because I didn't want to be ready. I didn't want any of this." Annie gestured between them. "You're the Alpha King. I'm nobody. I don't belong in your world." "You're an Omega," Damian said, standing up. The movement was fluid, predatory. "One of only 6 in the entire continental pack system. You think that makes you nobody." Annie backed up until she hit the door. "I'm not going back. You don't have a choice. There's always a choice." "Then choose," Damian said, closing the distance between them. He stopped just close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him, smell pine and smoke, and something underneath that made her wolf keen. "Choose to keep running. Keep taking pills that are slowly poisoning you. Keep living in this box, working a job that barely pays your rent, pretending to be human when every instinct you have is screaming at you to shift. Or choose to come home." "That's not my home." "Then what is?" He gestured around her apartment. "This. You call this living, Annie? You're surviving. Barely. It's better than being your possession." For the first time, real anger flashed across Damian's face. "Is that what you think you'd be? A possession? What else would I be? Your mate by arrangement, your Omega by designation. Just another thing you own." "You'd be my queen," Damian said, his voice low and dangerous. "You'd have power that most wolves only dream of. You'd be protected, provided for, honored. You'd want for nothing. Except freedom. Freedom to what? Live like this? Die alone in some human city where no one knows what you are." He leaned in, close enough that his breath stirred her hair. "Your wolf is dying, Annie. You feel it, don't you? Every day a little weaker. A little quieter. The suppressants are killing you from the inside out." Annie's eyes burned. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of him. But he was right. She could feel it. Her wolf, once vibrant and strong, had become a shadow. Some mornings she could barely sense it at all. "I'd rather die free than live in a cage," she said. Damian stared at her for a long moment. Then he stepped back, putting space between them. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "I'm not going to force you to come back. Not today." Annie's eyebrows shot up. "You're not?" "No. Because if I did, you'd spend every day looking for a way to escape. And I'm tired of chasing you." He pulled out his phone, typed something, and her phone buzzed in her pocket. "That's my number. You have 1 week to decide. Come back willingly, or I'll make the decision for you." "That's not fair." "Life isn't fair." He headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. "One more thing. If you run again, I'll find you again. But next time, I won't be patient. Next time, I'll bring you back whether you're ready or not. Understand?" Annie couldn't speak. She just nodded. Damian left without another word. The door closed behind him, and Annie stood there shaking, her wolf howling inside her chest. Not in fear. In loss. Like something vital had just walked out of her life. She slid down the door and sat on the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She'd built a whole life here. Small, yes. Quiet, yes. But it was hers. And now he wanted her to just throw it away and go back to the world she'd escaped. Her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Nathan. I'm downstairs. When you're ready to talk, I'll be at the cafe on 5th. Annie stared at the message. She should ignore it. Should pack up and leave tonight, Get as far from here as possible. But Damian's words echoed in her head. If you run again, I'll find you again. And she believed him. If the Alpha King had found her once, he could find her 1,000 times. She needed information. Needed to understand what she was actually dealing with. And Nathan had helped her, at least a little. Had warned her before Damian showed up. Maybe he'd help her again. Annie changed out of her pajamas, threw on jeans and a sweater, and headed out. The morning was cold, overcast, threatening rain. She walked the 4 blocks to the cafe on 5th, a nicer place than where she worked. The kind with actual art on the walls and coffee that cost $7. Nathan was in the back corner, 2 cups already on the table. He looked up when she approached, gestured to the seat across from him. Black coffee, he said, pushing 1 cup toward her. Figured you wouldn't want anything fancy. Annie sat, wrapping her hands around the cup for warmth. Why are you helping me? Because my brother is an idiot, Nathan said bluntly. And because I know what it's like to have your life decided for you before you get a say in it. You're a Cortez. You probably decided other people's lives. Nathan's laugh was bitter. Yeah, that's what everyone thinks. Truth is, I'm the spare. The second son. I exist to support Damian's rule, and produce heirs if something happens to him. That's it. That's my entire purpose according to pack law. Annie studied him. He looked like Damian, same dark hair and strong features. But where Damian carried himself with absolute authority, Nathan had something looser about him. Less certain. More human. What do you want me to do? She asked. Honestly? I think you should go back. What? Hear me out, Nathan said, holding up a hand. Damian's not lying about the suppressants. I've seen the medical reports. Another year, maybe 2, and your wolf will be gone completely. You'll be human for real, but you'll also be slowly dying. Your body needs to shift. Needs to connect with your wolf. It's not optional biology. Annie's stomach dropped. There has to be another way. If there is, we haven't found it. And trust me, we've looked. Damian had specialists from 3 countries examine your case. My case? You're not the first wolf to try to live as human. But you're the first Omega. The power dynamics are different. Your wolf isn't just suppressed, it's suffocating. And when an Omega's wolf dies, the Omega dies too. Usually within 6 months. The cafe suddenly felt too warm. Annie pulled at her collar, trying to breathe. You're saying I have to go back or I'll die? I'm saying you have to stop taking the suppressants and reconnect with your wolf, or you'll die. Whether you do that in Shadowpine or somewhere else is up to you. But Damian wants me in Shadowpine. Damian wants you, period, Nathan corrected. The location is secondary. But yes, he wants you in Packlands where he can protect you. From what? Nathan's expression turned serious. You're an unmated Omega, Annie. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How valuable? If certain packs found out where you were, they'd take you. Force a bond with one of their alphas. Use you to strengthen their bloodlines. That's barbaric. That's pack politics. Nathan leaned forward. Look, I'm not saying my brother is perfect. He's controlling, arrogant, and has the emotional range of a brick wall most days. But he's also the most powerful alpha in North America, and he's been half insane looking for you for 6 years. You're not just his mate. You're his obsession. That doesn't make me feel better. It should, because it means he'll do anything to keep you safe. Anything to make sure you're taken care of. You want freedom? Negotiate for it. You're his mate. You have more power over him than anyone else in the pack. Annie wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe she could have some control in this situation. But she'd seen the look in Damian's eyes. The absolute certainty. He'd said she had a week to decide, but they both knew the decision was already made. What if I can't do it? Annie asked quietly. What if I go back and I'm not what he needs? What if I'm just not enough? Nathan's expression softened. Annie, you ran from the Alpha King and survived on your own for 6 years. You built a life from nothing with a wolf you could barely access. If anything, he's not enough for you. She laughed, surprising herself. It came out watery and a little hysterical, but it was something. Your brother would love hearing that. My brother needs to hear it, Nathan said. He's been ruling with absolute authority for so long, he forgot that a mate isn't a subject. She's a partner. An equal. Omega wolves aren't equal to alphas. That's not how it works. It's how it should work, Nathan said firmly. And if you go back, if you agree to try this, you need to make him understand that. Set boundaries. Demand respect. Don't let him steamroll you just because the bond tells you to submit. Annie took a sip of her coffee. It was good, better than she usually had. She thought about her apartment with its broken heater and thin walls. Thought about working double shifts just to make rent. Thought about taking pills every morning that were slowly killing her, all to avoid a future she'd been terrified of. But maybe the future she'd been running from wasn't the one Damian was actually offering. Maybe it was time to stop running and start negotiating. 1 week, Annie said. He gave me 1 week. What do I do with that? You stop taking the suppressants, Nathan said immediately. Let your wolf wake up properly. And then you make a list. Everything you want. Everything you need. And when Damian comes back, you tell him your terms. What if he says no? Then you walk away. And I'll help you disappear somewhere even he can't find you. Annie blinked. You'd do that? Go against your brother. Nathan shrugged. I'm the spare, remember? My purpose is whatever I decide it is. And right now, I'm deciding it's making sure you actually have a choice. They talked for another hour. Nathan told her about pack life, about what being queen would actually mean. Not a possession, but a position of power. The Alpha King's mate had authority over the female pack members, controlled household resources, advised on political decisions. It wasn't powerless. It was just different power than she'd imagined. By the time Annie left the cafe, the sun was setting and she felt both more hopeful and more terrified than before. She walked home slowly, thinking about everything Nathan had said. When she got back to her apartment, she went straight to the bathroom and stared at the orange bottle of suppressants. Her hand hovered over it. 6 years of safety. 6 years of freedom. All contained in a bottle of pills that were killing her. Annie unscrewed the cap and dumped them in the toilet. Then she flushed, watching them swirl away. Her heart was pounding, her wolf already stirring like it knew what she'd done. For the first time in 6 years, she didn't take her evening dose. That night she dreamed. Not the muted, forgettable dreams she'd had on the suppressants. Real dreams, vivid and intense. She was running through a forest, faster than she'd ever moved as human. Her wolf was at the surface, powerful and whole, and she could feel every sensation. Wind in her fur, earth under her paws, and ahead of her, another wolf. Larger, darker, with eyes that glowed in the moonlight. Damian. She chased him through the trees, and he let her get close before darting away. Playing. Hunting. Something primal and right that made her wolf sing. They ran until she was exhausted, and then he circled back. Stood in front of her, majestic and powerful, and she felt the bond between them like a physical thing. Golden and unbreakable. She woke up gasping, covered in sweat. Her wolf was fully awake now, pressing against her skin like it wanted out. The sensation was overwhelming after years of numbness. She could smell everything. The coffee from the shop below, the rain on the pavement, and something else. Pine and smoke. Annie went to the window. 3 floors down, leaning against a black car, was Damian. He was looking up at her apartment, and even from this distance, she could feel his awareness. He knew what she'd done. Knew she'd stopped taking the suppressants. The bond between them was no longer suppressed, and it hummed with recognition. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just held her gaze for a long moment before getting in his car and driving away. Annie leaned her forehead against the glass. 6 days left until his deadline. 6 days to figure out who she wanted to be. The Annie who'd been running for 6 years, or the Annie who could stand toe-to-toe with an Alpha King and make him see her as an equal. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Nathan. He knows. Be ready. Annie looked at her reflection in the dark window. Her eyes were brighter than they'd been in years. More gold than green. Her wolf stared back at her, finally present, finally whole. And Annie realized something that should have terrified her, but somehow didn't. She wasn't just afraid of Damian. She was afraid of wanting him. Of the bond pulling her somewhere she'd sworn never to go. But want and fear weren't opposites. They were 2 sides of the same coin. And right now, for the first time in 6 years, she was willing to see what happened if she stopped running and started fighting for what she actually wanted. Whatever that turned out to be. Chapter 3. The second day without suppressants, Annie called in sick to work again. Not because she was actually sick, but because her wolf was clawing at her insides with enough force to make her double over in pain. Her body was trying to shift and couldn't. 6 years of chemical suppression creating a block that wouldn't break easily. She spent most of the morning in the bathtub, hot water doing nothing to ease the cramping in her muscles. By afternoon, she managed to get dressed and make it to the couch. Her phone had 17 missed calls from Kelly, 3 from the cafe owner, and 1 from a number she didn't recognize. She ignored all of them and turned on the television, trying to distract herself from the war happening inside her body. The knock on her door came at sunset. Annie knew who it was before she looked through the peephole. Nathan, holding a paper bag that smelled like Chinese food. She opened the door. I look terrible. You look like someone whose wolf is trying to rip out of their skin, Nathan said, pushing past her. Which is why I brought food and medical supplies. He set everything on her kitchen counter and started unpacking. Containers of lo mein and fried rice. A first aid kit. And a bottle of pills that made Annie's stomach drop. I'm not taking those, she said. These aren't suppressants. They're muscle relaxants. They'll help with the cramping while your body adjusts. Nathan opened the bottle and shook 2 pills into his palm. Trust me, you want these. Annie hesitated, then took them. Swallowed them dry. Within 20 minutes, the knots in her shoulders started to ease. She ate the lo mein slowly, watching Nathan move around her apartment like he'd been there before. Maybe he had. Maybe both Cortez brothers had been in and out of her space while she was at work, learning everything about her life. How long will this last? She asked. The adjustment period? 3 to 5 days, usually. Maybe longer since you've been suppressed so long. Nathan sat across from her, picking at his own container of rice. Your wolf needs to shift. That's the only way to fully reconnect. I can't shift in the city. I know. That's why Damian wants you to come back. Annie set down her fork. Has he always been like this? So controlling? Nathan considered the question. He's been Alpha King since he was 23. Our father died and Damian had to take over the entire territory with maybe 6 months of preparation. Every decision he made for the first 2 years, someone challenged. Every policy, every alliance, every move. He learned fast that showing weakness got you killed. So yeah, he's controlling. Because if he's not, someone will try to take what's his. And I'm his, Annie said flatly. You're his mate. That's different than being his possession, even if it doesn't feel like it. Does it feel different to him? Nathan was quiet for a moment. I don't know. Damian doesn't talk about his feelings. Never has. But I've never seen him like this about anyone or anything. When you ran, something in him broke. He looked for you for 2 years straight. When that didn't work, he expanded the territory. Made alliances. Built power. I think he figured if he was strong enough, important enough, you'd come back on your own. That's insane. That's Damian. Nathan leaned back in his chair. He doesn't understand that some things can't be controlled or forced. That some people need space to choose. Annie thought about Damian standing outside her apartment, watching. Waiting. Giving her a week that probably felt like torture to him. He's trying, though. In his own way. Yeah, he is. They ate in silence for a while. Annie's wolf was calmer now, the medication helping. She could feel it inside her, still weak but growing stronger. Getting used to being awake again. Nathan, she said slowly. What happens if I go back, and it doesn't work? If the bond isn't enough, then you leave. No one will stop you. Damian would. Not if you're honest with him. Not if you give it a real chance, and it still doesn't work. Nathan met her eyes. He's not a monster, Annie. He's just a man who's been waiting 6 years for something he thought he'd never get back. Annie wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe Damian was more than the ruthless Alpha King everyone described. But she'd seen the cold calculation in his eyes. The way he'd walked into her apartment and assessed it like a battlefield. That wasn't a man who accepted failure. After Nathan left, Annie tried to sleep. She couldn't. Her wolf was too active, too restless. She ended up pacing her apartment, wearing a path between the kitchen and the window. Every time she looked out, she half expected to see Damian's black car. But the street was empty. Day 3 was worse. The muscle relaxant stopped working. Annie's entire body felt like it was on fire, her wolf pushing so hard against her skin that she could see it rippling under the surface. She called Nathan in a panic, barely able to speak through the pain. He showed up with someone else. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes. She introduced herself as Dr. Reeves, pack physician. You're going into shift shock, Dr. Reeves said after examining her. Your wolf has been dormant so long that your body doesn't remember how to shift. We need to force it. How? Annie gasped. Alpha command. I'll need to call Damian. No. Annie shook her head frantically. No, I don't want him to see me like this. Dr. Reeves and Nathan exchanged a look. Annie, Nathan said gently. You're going to die if you don't shift. Your body can't take much more of this. There has to be another way. There isn't. An Alpha's command can force a shift in an Omega. It's the only thing that will work at this point. Dr. Reeves pulled out her phone. I'm calling him. Annie wanted to protest, but another wave of pain hit her, and she couldn't breathe. She heard Dr. Reeves talking, Nathan's hands on her shoulders keeping her upright. And then, 10 minutes later, footsteps thundering up the stairs. Damian burst through her door like he owned it, which was becoming a pattern. But this time he wasn't calm. His eyes were wild, face pale, and he crossed the room in 3 strides. "What did you do?" he demanded, kneeling in front of her. "Stop taking the pills," Annie managed. "Like you wanted. Not like this. Not without supervision." He looked at Dr. Reeves. "How bad?" "She needs to shift. Now." Damian's jaw tightened. He turned back to Annie, and his expression softened slightly. "I'm going to use Alpha Command. It's going to feel invasive, but it won't hurt." "Okay." Annie nodded, too tired to argue. "We need to get her outside," Dr. Reeves said. "She can't shift in here. There's not enough space." Nathan grabbed Annie's jacket while Damian lifted her like she weighed nothing. She wanted to protest, to say she could walk, but her body wasn't cooperating. He carried her down the stairs and out to his car, laying her in the back seat while Nathan got in front. They drove fast, out of the city and into the woods beyond. Annie lost track of time, consciousness fading in and out. When the car finally stopped, Damian carried her into the trees, far enough that the road disappeared behind them. He set her down gently on the forest floor. The earth was cold beneath her, covered in fallen leaves that smelled like decay and rain. Above her, the sky was dark, threatening a storm. "Annie," Damian said, kneeling beside her. "Look at me." She did. His eyes were intense, focused entirely on her. And when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made her wolf surge forward. "Shift." It wasn't a request. It was a command, backed by centuries of alpha power and the mate bond between them. Annie's body responded before her mind could, bones cracking and reforming, skin splitting to make room for fur. The pain was excruciating and brief, and then she was on 4 legs, panting, seeing the world through wolf eyes for the first time in 6 years. Everything was sharper, clearer. She could smell the pack wolves nearby, Nathan and Dr. Reeves keeping their distance. Could hear water running somewhere to the east. And she could feel Damian, his presence massive and overwhelming beside her. He'd shifted too. His wolf was enormous, easily twice her size, with dark fur and eyes that glowed gold in the dying light. He watched her carefully, waiting to see what she'd do. Annie's wolf knew what it wanted to do. It wanted to run. So she did. She took off through the trees, faster than she remembered being able to move. The forest blurred around her, instinct taking over. Behind her, she heard Damian following, but he wasn't chasing. He was pacing her, matching her speed, letting her lead. They ran until Annie's muscles burned, until her lungs felt like they'd burst. Then she slowed, sides heaving, and collapsed in a clearing beside a stream. The water looked black in the darkness, reflecting stars she hadn't seen in years from her city apartment. Damian approached slowly, giving her space. He lay down a few feet away, close enough to provide comfort, but far enough that she didn't feel trapped. And Annie realized something that surprised her. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Her wolf recognized his, trusted his, wanted to be close to him in a way that had nothing to do with forced bonds or arranged matings. This was what she'd been running from. Not Damian specifically, but this feeling. This pull toward someone else that felt bigger than her own choices. But lying here in the forest, in her wolf form for the first time in 6 years, she wondered if maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe the bond wasn't a cage. Maybe it was just connection. And maybe connection was only terrifying if you'd convinced yourself you were better off alone. Annie stood on shaky legs and walked to the stream. She drank deeply, the cold water shocking her system. When she looked up, Damian had moved closer. Not crowding her, just present. She could shift back now, her wolf satisfied and calm. But she didn't want to. Not yet. Instead, she walked over to where Damian lay and, after a moment of hesitation, curled up against his side. His wolf was warm, solid, and when she tucked her head under his chin, she felt something inside her settle. Like a piece that had been missing finally sliding into place. They stayed like that for hours. Long enough that Annie dozed, exhausted from the shift and the run. When she finally woke, the sky was lighter. Dawn approaching. Damian was still there, still awake, watching over her. She pulled away and shifted back to human. The change was easier this time, natural. She ended up naked in the forest, which should have been embarrassing but somehow wasn't. Damian shifted too, and Nathan appeared from the trees with clothes for both of them. "How do you feel?" Damian asked while she dressed. "Tired. Sore. Better." Annie pulled on the sweatpants Nathan had brought, avoiding Damian's gaze. Now that she was human again, the vulnerability of what she'd done crashed over her. She'd let him command her. Let him see her weak. Let herself curl up against him like his presence was the only thing keeping her together. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For helping. You don't need to thank me. I do. You could have forced this weeks ago. Could have commanded me to shift the moment you found me." She finally looked at him. "But you didn't. You gave me time, even though it was probably killing you." Damian's expression was unreadable. "I told you. I'm not going to force you. But you did. Just now. That was different. That was saving your life." He stepped closer, and Annie made herself hold her ground. "Annie, I know you think I'm some monster who wants to lock you away and control every aspect of your life. But that's not what this is. That's not what I want." "Then what do you want?" "You," he said simply. "However I can have you. If that means you come back to Shadowpine and take your place as queen, great. If that means you need time to figure things out first, fine. If that means you want to stay here and I have to visit you in this city I hate, I'll deal with it. But I need you to stop running long enough to figure out what you actually want. Not what you're afraid of. What you want." Annie's throat went tight. This was the most honest he'd been with her since showing up at her door. No demands. No commands. Just truth. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "Then we figure it out together." Damian held out his hand. "Come back with me. Not permanently. Just for a week. See the territory. Meet the pack. Let yourself imagine what life could be like without the fear. And if I still want to leave after a week, then I'll bring you back myself." Annie stared at his outstretched hand. This was it. The decision she'd been avoiding for 6 years. Stay in her small, safe life, or take a chance on something that terrified her. Her wolf was purring inside her chest, already knowing what it wanted. But her human side was still uncertain. "I need to talk to Nathan first," she said. Damian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine. But Annie, you've got 3 days left of your week. Don't waste them." He walked away, disappearing into the trees. Nathan emerged from wherever he'd been keeping watch, holding a bottle of water. "You heard all that?" Annie asked. "Hard not to." Nathan handed her the water. "So, what are you going to do?" "I don't know. Is he telling the truth? If I go back for a week and hate it, will he really let me leave? Honestly? I don't know. I've never seen him make a promise like that before." Nathan sat on a fallen log, gesturing for her to join him. "But I do know he meant what he said. He wants you to choose him, not be forced into it." Annie drank the water, thinking. Her wolf was still calm from the shift, satisfied in a way it hadn't been in years. And the bond with Damian, no longer suppressed by chemicals, hummed between them even with distance. Not painful, not demanding, just there. A constant awareness that he existed, and she existed, and they were connected whether she liked it or not. "What's Shadowpine like?" she asked. Nathan smiled. "It's beautiful. Mountains and forests, rivers running through the territory. The pack house is huge, kind of old-fashioned but comfortable. And the pack itself is strong. Loyal. They'd accept you as queen without question. Because I'm Damian's mate. Because you're an Omega who survived 6 years alone in the human world. That's not nothing, Annie. That's impressive as hell." She hadn't thought about it like that. She'd always seen her running as cowardice. But maybe it had been strength. Maybe surviving this long, building a life from nothing, proved she was tougher than she'd given herself credit for. "1 week," Annie said slowly. "I'll go back for 1 week. But I want things in writing. Terms and conditions. What I'm agreeing to, what he's promising, all of it." Nathan's grin was sharp. "Now you're thinking like a queen." They drove back to her apartment as the sun rose. Damian was already there, leaning against his car, looking tired but alert. Annie approached him carefully, aware that she was about to change everything. 1 week, she said. "But I want a contract. Written terms. And Nathan witnesses it." Something flickered in Damian's eyes. "Respect, maybe." "Done. What are your terms?" "I want freedom to leave the pack house whenever I want. I want no pressure about the mate bond or completing it. I want my own space, my own room. And I want you to answer my questions honestly. All of them. Even the ones you don't want to answer. Anything else? If after a week I decide to leave, you let me go. No tracking. No following. You let me live my life." Damian was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something, and showed her the screen. A contract already drafted, with spaces for terms. He added what she'd said, word for word, then signed it digitally and held the phone out to her. "Add anything else you want," he said. "Then sign." Annie read through it carefully. It was straightforward, no hidden clauses or loopholes. Just her terms and his agreement to honor them. She added one more line. Neither party will use Alpha Command on the other during this week, except in cases of immediate physical danger. Then she signed. Nathan witnessed it, and just like that, Annie had agreed to spend a week in the territory she'd sworn never to return to. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Now," Damian said. "Unless you need time to pack." Annie looked up at her apartment building. 6 years of her life contained in 3 rooms. Memories and routines, and a safety she'd built from scratch. Walking away from it felt like shedding skin. Painful but necessary. "I need an hour," she said. Damian nodded. "We'll wait." Annie went upstairs alone. She packed her essentials into 2 bags. Clothes, toiletries, the few photos she had of her parents from before they'd died. She looked around the apartment one last time, at the couch with the sunken cushion and the kitchen with its chipped counters. This had been home. But maybe home wasn't supposed to be small and safe. Maybe home was supposed to challenge you. She left her key on the counter with a note for Kelly explaining she had to leave town for family reasons. It wasn't exactly a lie. Then she grabbed her bags and walked out, locking the door behind her. Damian and Nathan were waiting by the car. Damian took her bags without a word and loaded them in the trunk. Annie climbed into the back seat, and as they pulled away from her apartment building, she watched it disappear in the side mirror. No turning back now. The drive to Shadowpine took 6 hours. Annie dozed for most of it, exhausted from the shift and the emotional upheaval. When she woke, they were driving through mountains, forests thick on either side of the road. The air smelled different here. Cleaner. Wild. "We're close," Nathan said from the front seat. Annie sat up, looking out the window. The forest opened up to reveal a valley with a river running through it. And in the center, on a hill overlooking everything, was the pack house. It was massive, built from stone and wood, looking like something out of another century. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys, and she could see wolves moving around the grounds. "That's home," Damian said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Home. The word felt foreign and familiar all at once. Annie's wolf stirred, curious and alert. This was Packland, territory she was connected to by birth and by bond. And as they drove through the gates and up the winding road to the house, she felt something she hadn't expected. Recognition. Like some part of her had always known she'd end up here. The car stopped in front of the main entrance. Damian got out and opened her door, offering his hand. Annie hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm, solid, steadying. "Welcome home, Annie," he said softly. And despite everything, despite her fear and uncertainty and the fact that she'd sworn never to come back here, some part of her believed him. This was home. Or it could be. If she let it. The front door opened, and people started emerging. Pack members, curious and excited, wanting to see the Alpha King's long-lost mate. Annie's heart raced, but Damian's hand tightened around hers. "1 week," he murmured, quiet enough that only she could hear. "Give me 1 week to show you this doesn't have to be a cage." Annie looked at him, at the man she'd been running from for 6 years. The ruthless Alpha King who'd tracked her down and given her a choice when he could have just taken what he wanted. And she made a decision that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. 1 week, she agreed. Let's see what happens. Chapter 4. The pack house was overwhelming. Annie had expected something cold and imposing, but the inside was warm, filled with dark wood and soft lighting. People kept stopping to stare as Damian led her through the halls, their curiosity barely masked. She felt every eye on her, assessing, judging, wondering if she was worthy of being their queen. "Ignore them," Damian said quietly. "They'll get used to you. And if they don't, then they'll learn to pretend." He stopped in front of a heavy wooden door on the 3rd floor. "Your room. Like you requested." Annie pushed the door open and stopped. The space was massive, easily 3 times the size of her entire apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in deep blue fabric. Windows overlooked the valley, showing the river and forests beyond. There was a sitting area with a fireplace, a bathroom that looked like something from a magazine, and her bags already waiting by the closet. "This is too much," she said. "This is the Queen's suite. It connects to the Alpha's chambers through that door." Damian pointed to a door on the far wall. "But it locks from your side." As promised. Annie walked to the windows, pressing her palm against the cool glass. Outside, wolves were training in human form, sparring and running drills. Beyond them, the forest stretched endlessly. She could shift and run for days without hitting civilization. "I have meetings until dinner," Damian said from the doorway. "Nathan will show you around if you want. Or you can rest. Whatever you need. What time is dinner?" 7. I'll come get you. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Annie stood alone in the enormous room, feeling small and out of place. Her wolf was content, happy to be in pack territory, but her human side was screaming at her to run. She unpacked instead, hung her few clothes in the massive closet where they looked pathetic and inadequate, put her toiletries in the bathroom that had more counter space than her entire previous bathroom, arranged the photos of her parents on the nightstand. Then she lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. The knock came an hour later. Nathan, wearing casual clothes and a sympathetic expression. Want the tour? Annie nodded and followed him out. He showed her the main floors first. The kitchen, where pack members were preparing dinner. The dining hall with its long tables. The library, filled with books about pack history and law. The training rooms, the medical wing, the council chambers. And that's the Alpha's office, Nathan said, gesturing to a closed door. Where Damian spends most of his time being intimidating. Does he ever relax? Not really. He's been Alpha King since he was 23. I don't think he knows how to relax anymore. Nathan led her outside, into the gardens behind the house. But he's trying. For you. They sat on a stone bench overlooking a fountain. The afternoon was cool, autumn settling over the territory. Annie could smell wood smoke and pine, could hear wolves in the distance. Why did you really help me? She asked Nathan. You barely know me. Because I know what it's like to feel trapped by pack law, Nathan said. My entire life has been about serving Damian's rule, supporting his decisions, never questioning, never wanting anything for myself. And I've watched him be miserable for 6 years because the one thing he actually wanted chose to run rather than stay. I figured maybe if you both got a chance to actually know each other, without all the pressure and expectations, something different might happen. You're a romantic. Nathan laughed. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Annie watched pack members move through the grounds, going about their lives. Children playing near the forest edge. Elders sitting on porches. Wolves shifting and running through the trees. It looked peaceful. Normal. Nothing like the prison she'd imagined. Annie, Nathan said carefully. What happened 6 years ago? What made you run? Annie was quiet for a long moment. I was 17. Just presented. My parents had died the year before, and I was alone in the pack, trying to figure out who I was. Then I found out about the arrangement. That Alpha Silas had promised me to Damian before I was even born. That my entire future had been decided without me. She picked at a thread on her sleeve. I went to confront them about it. Walked into Silas's office and Damian was there. And the moment our eyes met, the bond snapped into place. And that scared you. It terrified me. Because suddenly I didn't just have an arranged marriage to deal with. I had biology telling me I belonged to someone I didn't know. Damian was 25, already training to take over as Alpha. He was intimidating and powerful, and completely out of my league. And everyone kept telling me how lucky I was. How perfect the match was. How I should be grateful. But you didn't feel grateful. I felt trapped. Annie looked at Nathan. So I ran. Took money from my parents' estate and disappeared. I thought if I could just get away from the bond from pack lands, I could figure out who I was without all that pressure. But the bond doesn't go away. It just sits there, pulling at you, reminding you what you left behind. Nathan was quiet for a moment. You know Damian didn't want the arrangement either, right? Annie's head snapped up. What? He fought with his father about it. Said it wasn't fair to either of you. But Silas was old school, believed in strengthening bloodlines and political alliances. Damian had to choose between defying his father or honoring a promise made before you were born. Nathan met her eyes. He chose honor. But he wasn't happy about it. He never told me that. Damian doesn't talk about his feelings. Ever. But I was there. I heard the arguments. Nathan stood up. Come on. There's something I want to show you. He led her to a building separate from the main house. Inside was an art studio, filled with paintings and sculptures. Most of them were of the territory. Mountains and forests, the river at sunset, wolves running through snow. Damian did these, Nathan said. Annie stared. The paintings were beautiful, detailed, emotional in a way she never would have expected from the cold Alpha King. I didn't know he painted. No one does. This is his private space. But I thought you should see it. Thought you should know there's more to him than the ruthless leader everyone sees. Nathan walked to a painting in the back corner, covered with a sheet. He pulled it off. Annie's breath caught. It was her. Younger, 17 maybe, standing in a field of wildflowers. The detail was incredible, like Damian had painted it from memory. And her expression in the painting, it wasn't scared or uncertain. It was free. "He painted that right after you left," Nathan said quietly. "Been coming here every day since, working on these. I think it's the only way he knows how to process what he lost." Annie couldn't speak. She stared at the painting, at the version of herself Damian had been holding onto for 6 years. Not a possession. Not a political alliance. Just a girl he'd met for 5 minutes and never forgotten. "Why are you showing me this?" she managed. "Because you asked me to help you understand him. This is how." Nathan covered the painting again. "Damian isn't good with words. He's good with actions. And everything he's done for 6 years, building power and expanding territory and becoming the strongest Alpha King in generations, it was all to become someone worthy of you coming back." They walked back to the main house in silence. Annie's mind was spinning, reevaluating everything she thought she knew. By the time they reached her room, it was nearly 7. Nathan left her to get ready for dinner, and Annie stood in front of the closet, staring at her inadequate wardrobe. She chose the nicest thing she had, a simple black dress she'd worn to exactly one human party and felt overdressed at. Here, in the pack house, it felt too casual. But it was all she had. The knock came at exactly 7. Damian, in a dark suit that made him look even more intimidating. His eyes swept over her, and something softened in his expression. "You look beautiful," he said. "I look underdressed." "You look perfect." He offered his arm. "Ready." Annie took it, her heart pounding. They walked down to the dining hall together, and when they entered, the room fell silent. Every pack member stood, showing respect to their alpha and his mate. Annie's wolf preened at the recognition, but her human side wanted to hide. Damian led her to the head table, pulling out a chair for her before taking his own seat. Nathan sat across from them, along with several other people Damian introduced as his council members. They watched her curiously, assessing. Dinner was elaborate. Multiple courses, all prepared perfectly. Annie barely tasted any of it, too aware of everyone watching. But Damian seemed relaxed, talking with his council about territory matters and pack business. He included her in the conversation, asking her opinion even though she knew nothing about pack politics. "What do you think, Annie?" he asked about some trade agreement. "Should we accept their terms?" Everyone looked at her. Annie's mind went blank. Then she forced herself to think. What do we get out of it? Access to their hunting grounds during migration season. And what do they get? Protection during the winter months. Annie considered. Seems like we're giving more than we're getting. Can we negotiate for something else? Additional resources or training rights? Damian smiled, and it was genuine. Good point. We'll counteroffer. The council members nodded, seemingly impressed. Annie felt a small surge of satisfaction. Maybe she could do this. Maybe being queen wasn't about knowing everything, but about asking the right questions. After dinner, Damian walked her back to her room. They stopped outside her door, the hallway quiet and dimly lit. "You did well tonight," he said. "I barely said anything. You spoke when it mattered. That's what counts." He hesitated, then reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, intimate. "Nathan said he showed you the studio." Annie's breath caught. "You knew about that?" "I told him to. If you're going to make an informed decision, you need all the information." Damian's hand dropped. "I'm not good at talking about feelings, Annie. Never have been. But those paintings, they're the truth. Every one of them." "Why me?" Annie asked quietly. "You're the Alpha King. You could have anyone. Why hold on to someone who ran?" "Because you're mine," Damian said simply. "Not because of an arrangement or pack politics. Because when you walked into my father's office 6 years ago, something in me recognized something in you. And I've never been able to let that go, no matter how much easier it would have been. That's not healthy. Probably not." He smiled slightly. "But I've never claimed to be healthy. Just honest." Annie looked at him, really looked at him. Saw past the Alpha King to the man underneath. The one who painted to process his emotions. The one who'd waited 6 years instead of forcing a bond. The one who was trying, in his own complicated way, to give her the choice she'd never had. "I saw the painting," she said. "The one of me in the field. I remember that day. You were walking back from the market, carrying wildflowers. You looked so free. So happy. I wanted to give you that. But I didn't know how. You could have talked to me. Explained that you didn't want the arrangement either. I was 25 and terrified. You were 17 and even more terrified. I thought giving you space was the right call. I was wrong." Damian stepped closer. "I'm trying not to be wrong this time. Trying to do this right. But I need your help. Need you to tell me what you need instead of me guessing. Annie's heart was racing. This close, she could smell pine and smoke, could feel the heat radiating off him. Her wolf wanted to close the distance, to complete the bond that had been pulling at them for 6 years. But her human side needed more. I need time, she said. I need to figure out who I am here. What being queen actually means. What we could be without all the fear and pressure. Then take it. The week is yours. No expectations, no demands. He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. But Annie, when the week is over, I'm going to ask you to stay. And I'm hoping you'll say yes. He pulled back and walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway with her heart pounding and her wolf howling for her to follow. But she didn't. She went into her room, locked the door, and tried to process everything that had happened. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Nathan showed her more of the territory. The schools where pack children learned. The hospitals. The businesses the pack ran. Everyone she met was respectful, curious, but not pushy. And slowly, Annie started to see what life here could be like. She attended council meetings with Damian, learning about pack politics and territory management. She was surprised to find she was good at it. Good at seeing solutions others missed, at asking questions that shifted perspectives. The council members started directing questions to her, valuing her input. She trained with the pack warriors, her wolf finally strong enough to shift regularly. It felt incredible, running through the forests with other wolves, being part of something larger than herself. And every night, Damian walked her to her room. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about taking over as Alpha King, about the pressure and the loneliness. She told him about living in the human world, about the fear and the freedom. Slowly, the walls between them started to crumble. On the 5th night, something changed. They were standing outside her door again, talking about a treaty negotiation. Damian was animated in a way she rarely saw, passionate about protecting the pack. And Annie realized she was staring at his mouth, wondering what it would feel like to kiss him. Annie, Damian said softly, and she realized he'd stopped talking. Was watching her with dark eyes that missed nothing. What are you thinking? That I might be in trouble, she admitted. What kind of trouble? The kind where I'm starting to want things I swore I'd never want. She looked up at him. You make it hard to remember why I was running. Damian's expression intensified. Is that a bad thing? I don't know yet. He reached out, cupping her face with one hand. His thumb brushed her cheek, gentle despite his strength. Tell me to stop and I will. Stop what? This. He leaned in, giving her time to pull away. But Annie didn't pull away. She closed the distance, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative. Then the mate bond flared between them, golden and intense, and gentle became desperate. Damian's hand slid into her hair, pulling her closer, and Annie's arms went around his neck. She felt like she was falling and being caught at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damian rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for 6 years, he murmured. Was it worth the wait? Every second. He pulled back slightly, searching her face. Annie, I know you still have 2 days. But I need to know. Is there a chance? Any chance at all that you might stay? Annie's heart was pounding. A week ago, she would have said no without hesitation. But now, after seeing the territory and meeting the pack and learning who Damian actually was beneath the Alpha King exterior, she wasn't sure. There's a chance, she said carefully. Relief flooded his expression. That's all I needed to hear. He kissed her again, softer this time, and then forced himself to step back. Good night, Annie. Good night, Damian. She went inside, leaning against the closed door, trying to calm her racing heart. Her wolf was singing, ecstatic at the bond finally being acknowledged. But her human side was still scared. Still uncertain if she could actually do this. The 6th day, everything fell apart. Annie was in the gardens, reading through pack law documents Nathan had given her, when someone approached. A woman in her 40s, elegant and cold-eyed. So you're the famous runaway Omega, the woman said. Annie looked up. Can I help you? I'm Vivian Blackwood, head of the Blackwood family, one of the oldest bloodlines in Shadowpine. She sat down without being invited. I wanted to meet the girl who thinks she's worthy of being our queen. Annie's wolf bristled at the tone. I haven't decided if I want to be your queen. Good, because you're not fit for it. Vivian's smile was sharp. You abandoned the pack. Lived as human. Denied your nature for years. And now you think you can just walk back in and take a position you don't deserve. I never asked for this position. Exactly. You didn't want it then, And you're only considering it now because Damian gave you no choice. Do you really think that's a foundation for leadership? Vivian leaned forward. You'll fail. You'll realize you're in over your head, and you'll run again. And when you do, you'll destroy Damian in the process. He's spent 6 years rebuilding his authority after you made him look weak. If you leave again, the council will lose faith. Other packs will see vulnerability. You'll tear down everything he built. Annie's hands were shaking. Get out. I'm trying to help you see reality. You're not strong enough for this. You're not prepared. And staying here because you feel guilty or because the bond is pulling at you isn't enough. Vivian stood. Do everyone a favor. Leave now before you cause real damage. She walked away, leaving Annie sitting there with Vivian's words echoing in her head. And the worst part was they made sense. Annie wasn't prepared to be queen. She barely understood pack politics. What if Vivian was right? What if she was only considering staying because of the bond, not because she actually wanted this life? She went back to her room and didn't come out for dinner. Damian knocked, but she told him she wasn't feeling well. She heard him hesitate outside her door then leave. That night, Annie barely slept. She kept replaying Vivian's words, kept thinking about all the ways she could fail. By morning, she'd made a decision. She found Damian in his office, going through paperwork. He looked up when she entered, and his expression immediately clouded with concern. What's wrong? I can't do this, Annie said, the words tumbling out. I thought I could, but I can't. Vivian was right. I'm not prepared to be queen. I'll just fail and hurt you in the process. Damian stood slowly. Vivian talked to you? She told me the truth. That I'm not strong enough for this. That I'll run again and destroy everything you built. And you believed her. It wasn't a question. She made valid points. She's been trying to position her daughter as a potential queen for years, Damian said, his voice dangerously quiet. She sees you as a threat. So she manipulated you. She didn't manipulate me. She just helped me see reality. Reality. Damian walked around his desk. You want reality, Annie? Here it is. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. You survived 6 years alone with a dying wolf. You built a life from nothing. You walked into council meetings knowing nothing about pack politics and asked questions that changed how we approached problems. In less than a week, you've earned more respect from the pack than Vivian has in 40 years. That's not true. It is. And you know it. But you're scared, so you're looking for an excuse to run again. He stopped in front of her. I can't stop you. We had an agreement. If after a week you want to leave, I let you go. But don't leave because Vivian Blackwood made you doubt yourself. Leave because you genuinely don't want this life. Leave because we're not right for each other. But don't leave because you're afraid of failing. Annie's eyes burned. What if I do fail? Then we figure it out together. That's what being mates means. Damian took her hand. Annie, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to try. To give us a real chance. Not a week. A real chance. I don't know if I can. Yes, you do. You've known since that first night when you curled up against me in the forest. You've known every time we talked about pack business, and you got excited about solving problems. You've known every time you shifted and ran with the pack and felt like you belonged. He squeezed her hand. Your wolf knows. Your instincts know. The only thing stopping you is fear. Annie wanted to deny it, but she couldn't, because he was right. She was terrified. Terrified of wanting this and losing it. Terrified of failing and letting everyone down. Terrified of being happy. What if it doesn't work? She whispered. What if it does? Damian pulled her closer. What if you stay and we figure out how to lead the pack together? What if you become the queen everyone needs, not because you're perfect, but because you actually care? What if we build something real instead of running from something that scares us? You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying and complicated, and we'll probably fight about how to do things. But Annie, I would rather fail with you than succeed with anyone else. The walls she'd been building crumbled. Annie looked at this man, this Alpha King who'd waited 6 years and learned to paint because he couldn't process his emotions any other way. Who'd given her choice when he could have taken control. Who saw strength in her when she only saw weakness. I'm still scared, she said. I know. So am I. Damian rested his forehead against hers. But I'm more scared of losing you again. So I'm asking you to stay. Not for a week. Forever. Be my queen. Be my mate. Be my partner. And let's figure out the rest together. Annie's heart was pounding. This was it. The moment where she chose. Run again and stay safe, or stay and risk everything. She thought about her apartment with its broken heater. Thought about working double shifts and taking pills that were killing her. Thought about 6 years of loneliness disguised as freedom. Then she thought about running through the forest in her wolf form. Thought about council meetings where her voice mattered. Thought about Damian's gentle touches and honest words. Thought about belonging to something larger than herself. Okay, she said quietly. Damian pulled back slightly. Okay, I'll stay. Not because of the bond or because I'm giving up, but because I actually want this. I want to be your queen. I want to lead the pack with you. I want to see what we can build together. She looked up at him. I'm staying, Damian. The relief on his face was profound. He kissed her, deep and claiming, and Annie felt the mate bond flare between them like fire. This time, she didn't fight it. She let herself fall into it, into him, into the life she'd been running from. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damian smiled. A real smile, unguarded and happy in a way she'd never seen. I should warn you, he said. Vivian's going to be insufferable about this. Let her. I'll handle her. That's my queen. He kissed her again, softer. We should tell the pack. Make it official. Now. Unless you want to wait. Annie thought about it, then shook her head. No. I'm done waiting. I'm done running. Let's do this. They walked to the great hall together, hand in hand. Damian called the pack, and within minutes, the room was filled with curious wolves. Annie stood beside him, her heart pounding but her resolve steady. I have an announcement, Damian said, his voice carrying authority. Annie has agreed to stay. She'll be formally recognized as queen at the next full moon. The room erupted in cheers. Pack members rushed forward, congratulating them, welcoming Annie. She was overwhelmed by the acceptance, by the genuine happiness in their faces. Even the council members looked pleased. Vivian was in the back, her expression sour. But she didn't protest. Didn't cause a scene. Just stood there, defeated. Nathan pushed through the crowd and pulled Annie into a hug. Told you it would work out. You did, Annie admitted. Now you just have to figure out how to actually lead the pack. But that's tomorrow's problem. He grinned. Tonight, celebrate. The pack threw together an impromptu party. Food and music, wolves shifting and running through the territory. Annie stayed close to Damian, still processing everything that had happened. He kept her hand in his, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. You okay? He asked quietly. Yeah, just overwhelmed. We can leave if you need to. No, I want to stay. Want to be part of this. She looked up at him. Is it always like this? The pack coming together? When there's something to celebrate, yes. We're family. Complicated and messy, but family. He pulled her closer. You're part of that now. Annie leaned into him, feeling the truth of it. She was part of something larger than herself. Part of a pack, a family, a future she'd been too scared to imagine. Later that night, after the party wound down and the pack dispersed, Damian walked her back to her room. They stopped outside her door, but this time, something was different. Come in, Annie said. Damian's eyes darkened. Annie, I'm sure. I want this. I want you. She opened the door, pulling him inside. No more running. No more fear. Just us. He kissed her like he'd been holding back for years, which he had. And Annie kissed him back, finally letting herself feel everything she'd been denying. The bond flared between them, golden and complete, and when they finally came together, it felt like coming home. Afterward, lying in Damian's arms with the moonlight streaming through the windows, Annie felt peace for the first time in 6 years. This was where she belonged, not because of pack law or arranged marriages or biology, but because she chose it, because he chose her, because together, they were stronger than apart. I love you, Damian said quietly. I've loved you since you walked into my father's office 6 years ago. And I'll love you for the rest of my life. Annie's throat went tight. I love you too. It scares me, but I do. We'll figure out the scary parts together. Promise? Promise. He kissed her forehead. My queen. Annie smiled, closing her eyes. Your queen, she agreed. 3 months later, during the winter full moon, Annie was formally recognized as Queen of Shadowpine. She wore a dress that actually fit, stood beside Damian in front of the entire pack, and accepted the title she'd once run from. The ceremony was beautiful. Pack members pledged their loyalty, the council acknowledged her authority, and when it was over, Damian pulled her into his arms and kissed her in front of everyone. How does it feel? He asked. Annie looked around at the pack, at Nathan grinning from the front row, at the territory stretching beyond the pack house, at the life she'd chosen instead of the one she'd run to. It feels like home, she said. And it did. Not because it was perfect or easy, but because it was hers. Because she'd stopped running long enough to realize that sometimes the scariest thing isn't being trapped. Sometimes the scariest thing is admitting you want to stay. She'd been pretending to be human to escape the ruthless Alpha King. But in the end, she'd discovered something more important. She'd discovered herself. And she'd discovered that love wasn't a cage. It was wings. And for the first time in her life, Annie was ready to fly.